Hey there! I just wanted to pop in for a few minutes on this Friday evening. So I don't know if you're driving home, or if you're coming home from work, or if you're picking the kids up, or if you're just chilling out at home ready for a weekend. So I'm going to talk about one principle that can increase your contentment and stop burnout right in its tracks. Okay, so I'm going to give some practical steps to get there and then some scriptures. I think that we all know that feeling at one point in our lives or another, probably right now, maybe for you, that you feel stretched out, you feel maxed out, and like you're doing a million different things, but you're not enjoying any of them. So you keep saying yes to things that aren't necessarily what you love, they're not what you went to school for, but you said yes to them, and now you feel completely burdened by them, and you feel like you're just emotionally, physically, everything depleted. I don't know if you're there right now. So I wanted to speak from my own life, what I've gone through, what I've experienced, and some wisdom that I've gained from it, as I always try to speak from my own experiences and just my encounters with Jesus to find some wisdom through it all. So I am Laura Dudek, if you don't know me. I am the women's director, the women's leader at the Edge Church in Cleveland, Ohio. I am the executive director of Rescue for Love, a nonprofit organization, and I also am the author of Scars of Grace. So I'm going to jump right in, and that always starts with a personal story. So for the longest time, I was this person, right? I was completely maxed out. I really didn't have any boundaries to say no to things. I said yes to a lot that wasn't necessarily in my wheelhouse, if you want to say that. It was actually last year, right before my wedding, that I had taken on a lot. So I was running a nonprofit organization, I was in school, I was trying to balance my own business and relationships and plan a wedding, and it was all these things that I had said yes to, I was committed to, but I found myself completely overwhelmed. I had really not a lot of contentment because I was just maxed out, okay? And I was on the verge of burnout. And I remember very clearly being in TJ Maxx with my mom doing some wedding shopping, and I was in the clearance aisle, and I started having heart palpitations. I don't know if anyone's had those, but it is scary. When you have that feeling like you can't control your own body, like an anxiety attack, it is a real thing, and it is not fun. So I started having that, and after that moment, it triggered something in me to know, okay, there has to be some boundaries here because I'm burned out. I am literally burned out. I have nothing left to give. And so after the wedding, I actually took a series of steps to take away a lot of the things in my life. And it was actually the Lord who was telling me, like, you need to put some of these things on the shelf. And so I entered in this season of actually having very little responsibility because I couldn't handle a lot because I was so burned out. I don't know if anyone has been there before. And so he had me put the nonprofit on the shelf, school finished. He was having me say no to more projects and, for my own business. And so I was just, trying to figure out who I was, while I was taking a break from everything. And that season was actually this past summer, it was a couple months, and I nosedived into, or nose dove, whatever the word is, into depression because I had never been in a place of doing nothing before and just having to pretty much twiddle my thumbs and figure out, okay, Lord, who am I? And so it started this process for me of going back to square one to ask the question, who are you, Laura? What are you doing with your life? What are you called to? What are you good at? Do you know who you really are? And it started this whole process. It was such a beautiful time, and it was trying, it was difficult, but it was so awesome. And from that point, I learned a critical lesson. This is what I want to talk about. This is the key principle that I want to talk about today. Because now, as I've re-entered some of those things that I had once put on the shelf, and now I'm back at it, I live my life by this principle because it is so important. And it can change your life if you abide by it, if you stick to it. Okay, so that principle is stay in your own lane. I love this. One of my best friends says this all the time. She's so honest about it. She'll have something come up for her ministry or for her work, and it'll be an opportunity that is just not in her wheelhouse, and she will be so blunt and say, it's just not my lane. I gotta stay in my lane. It's not my thing. And so I think if we practice this we can be so much more effective in our lives at maintaining contentment and stopping burnout before it even happens. So I want to go right into scripture because I found this verse in the midst of all of the chaos kind of this summer. And it's actually in the Message version. I don't know if you read the Message version, but it's great sometimes. So it's Matthew 11:28-30. And it says, "Are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me. Yet get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me and you'll learn to live freely and lightly." And what really stuck out to me this past Sunday actually was that phrase, and it says, "I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you." And so I want to drive home this first point, or this first concept, is that Jesus doesn't put anything ill-fitting on you. We do that ourselves. So for us, if we are taking on too much, if we are taking on jobs that we know are not in our wheelhouse, that are not part of our dreams, our call, our responsibility, then that's when we find burnout, because we're not actually in line with what God is calling us to do. And if you look at more of like the New Living Translations or the NIV, it'll say, "Come to me all who are wearied and heavy laden," or some language like that, right? And that word weary actually is a load, but it means strenuous work, like work in the field. It's not a good work where you're pressing forward. It's this labor where you're like sweating and you're exhausted and you have nothing left. And so Jesus makes this comparison to say, we have to learn the unforced rhythms of grace. Yes, there's work, but I'm not going to put anything on you that I've not called you to. And I love the fact that, and this is a lesson that I have adopted and live out continually, I try to, is that I don't ever want to be doing something that is outside the will of God. I don't want to be doing something that I am not called to, because that's disobedience. And there isn't favor in that. There's not grace for that. I want to do the things that God has prepared for me so that there's grace and there's anointing, and God meets me in that place. And so when we look at this verse and it says, "I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you," and then we put something on ourselves, it's almost like the Lord is looking at us like, what are you doing? Why are you taking all that on? You don't have to. That isn't what I've called you to. You're just taking it upon yourself to say yes to everything. And often I think it is a misconception or just a lie that we believe that as Christians we are made to just go, go, go and not stop, and that it is our job or it is something that we have to do. It's necessary for us to work so hard that we're exhausted all the time. It also becomes like a medal of honor or something when we always reply to people, "I'm just so busy. I am just exhausted and I have no time for myself." And I think that's a really dangerous place to be, actually, when we start idolizing that mentality and idolizing that life, that we are so exhausted that we don't have time for ourselves, or that we don't have time to rest. That's a biblical principle that we have to maintain and we have to be conscious of. So then we go into 1 Peter 5, it's verses 4-7, and this is also in the Message. And it says, "When God, who is the best shepherd of all, comes out in the open with his rule, he'll see that you've done it right and commend you lavishly. And you who are younger must follow your leaders, but all of you, leaders and followers alike, are to be down to earth with each other. For God has had it with the proud, but takes delight in just plain people." And I love this. It says, "So be content with who you are and don't put on airs. God's strong hand is on you. He'll promote you at the right time. Live carefree before God. He is most careful with you." I love that he says, he's done with the proud, but he delights, he loves plain people. And then he commands us and he says, "Be content with who you are and pretty much take off your mask. Don't put on airs anymore." And so I think the number one reason why we take on too much is our own pride. That's really hard, right? I don't really like that word. I struggle with it a lot, but I think at the end of the day, we have pride. And it actually means the dictionary definition is a feeling or deep pleasure or satisfaction derived from one's own achievements, the achievements of those with whom one is closely associated, or from qualities or possessions that are widely admired. And I think from that definition, we take a lot of pride in the fact that the quality of busyness or the quality of being exhausted is something to be admired. And so we want to heap up all of these accolades. We want to heap up the compliments that we get. And how do you do it all? How do you manage all of that? And you're thinking, well, I'm not. Honestly, I'm not. But they think I am. So that's really great. And so I think there's two ways that we can, am I still on? Okay. There's two reasons why we take on too much, okay? And it all stems from the fact that we want to be the hero and we don't want to disappoint people, okay? So the first one is that we want to find our worth. So this comes really from the fact that we want to get affirmation from others that they need us, that quote unquote need us. So when someone asks you to do something, even though you know it's not in your wheelhouse, you know that it's not something that's in your lane and that you're good at or that you enjoy, you don't have time for it, it's very complimentary to say for them to come to you and say, oh, can you do this for me? And then you're thinking, oh yeah, I don't want to disappoint them. I want to show them that I can do this, and so you say yes, even though you know your realistic answer is no. The second thing, and the second part of that, is that we want to show that we don't have any needs. And this, for me, was really, really difficult because I would take on everyone else's stuff and then not be able to tend to my own life. And so I would get no sleep. I would have no time to relax. I wouldn't know how to relax, And I would get to this point where I would think that I have no needs. And so we want other people to believe that because we're believing that. We're trying to, attain that kind of life. And that is just simply not healthy. So we have the reason why we want to take on too much is because we want to find our worth. The second part of that is that we want to prove our worth. And this really comes from a perspective of valuing ourselves. I think a lot of us actually struggle with our value and we struggle with our worth. And so we want to prove that we're worth it. We want to prove that we're worthy or that our skills are valuable or our life is valuable. And so we want to prove that to ourselves. We want to prove it to others. And a key way you can think about this, and when I was first in the season of marriage and all of that, and the Lord was really speaking to me about boundaries in my life and taking on too much and all of that, He showed me this picture of me on a beach, on like a seashore type deal. And for me, that's one of the most relaxing places in the world. I love being by the water. It's so relaxing. It's my place to just rest. And the Lord showed me on this beach, but I wasn't relaxing. I was actually carrying all this baggage, right? And this is a common, image that we get, an illustration that we hear, right? And I was so carrying all this baggage. I was carrying luggage in my hands. I was trying to navigate, like, how do I carry way too much that I can't actually balance it all? But even more, the Lord showed me my gaze, which was watching the people that were sitting on the beach who were staring at me. And I was preoccupied with what they were thinking about me than my own journey and my own struggle. And so even though I knew I was struggling, I thought, well, they need to think that I can handle all of this. Like, I want to show them that I can handle this. I want to show that I can balance all these things. And they're going to be so impressed that I make it all the way down to the end of the beach. And that's obviously not a healthy way of thinking, but that's the way I was living my life. And so the Lord kind of showed me the ending of this scene where He was taking off one by one each item and just leaving it on the seashore and allowing me to just walk in freedom and to walk in peace and to not worry about what people think. I mean, who really cares? You pass them by and then that's it. You're not seeing them anymore, So I think that's a great way to live our lives, is that we can't just be trying to prove our worth to people. Like, they'll see how much I'm really, valuable. They'll see my expertise. They'll see how much I can balance and that I can really do it all. Because realistically is that we already have value and we can't do it all. That's why we need Jesus. He'll place the things that are appropriate on us at the right time in the right season, right? And so this, like I said, all comes down to the fact of our value. What are we believing about ourselves? Because we have to operate from our value and not for it or to achieve it, right? So I think there's a difference, is that when we operate out of it, then we don't achieve for it or from it, right? So I think that there's a practical way to stay in our lane and operate out of our value and not for it, right? Okay, so I think I said it like 3 times, but we're good, right? Okay, so practical ways that we can stay in our own lane. There's 3 points here, okay? The first one is that we need to know our lane. And this has taken me 29 years to understand the importance of knowing myself. Because no one else is called to understand you like you're called to understand you. You need to know how you work. You need to know what your strengths and your weaknesses are. You need to know your personality, you know? And so in my season of 3 months of knowing myself, I took so many personality tests. I took so many strengths finder tests and spiritual gift tests and, the DISC and Myers-Briggs and, all these crazy things just to know who I was. Because if you don't understand your lane, you can't stay in it, right? If you don't know where your lane ends and where it starts and where it ends, then you don't know your boundaries, right? So you don't know your maximum capacity. And for me, understanding, one of the number one things actually was understanding that I'm an inspirational person. And I actually had this epiphany on Sunday, which is really, it was such a great moment. But I have somewhat always known that I was an inspirational type person, meaning I love to inspire people. That's what I live for. But I never fully embraced it. And so I struggled with the fact that, why am I not an accountant? Why am I not, a theologian? Why don't I love numbers? Why don't I do well with really sensitive stories? I cry all the time, when I hear people's, heartbreaking stories. Why is this? And what the Lord was showing me even this past Sunday was to embrace that, because I'm not made to be anyone else. I'm made to inspire people. That's what I'm made to do, and I love doing it. So I just need to do it. And so I can't just keep comparing myself and putting myself in the shoes of someone else and trying to veer into someone else's lane because I don't know what I'm made to do. And that's just the most practical thing that you could possibly do. So what I'm going to do for you is I'm actually going to post a couple of the links for some websites that I know of that can help you understand your spiritual gifts. You can even Google it. You can take what I found to be a great tool. It's called 16 Personalities, and it's all based on these characters that have different personalities. So you'll be assigned a character, and you'll be able to understand yourself, how you handle conflict, how you handle your work environments or your job, how you handle romantic relationships and your strengths and your weaknesses. And it really paints a picture for you to understand who you are so that you can operate at your best. You can live your best life possible, and you can start operating in contentment and not saying yes to things that aren't you. You know what I mean? So I would love for you guys to take those tests and just understand who you are. The other part of that to stay in your lane is to consult the Lord about what you're called to do and what you are responsible for. And this is so important because I do believe that if you have said yes to something, you are committed to it. Your yes is your yes and your no is your no. So if you have said yes to something, and you need to follow through on that. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying you should bail on things because I don't think that's appropriate at all times. There are extenuating circumstances, but for the most part, your yes is your yes. Okay, so follow through on that. But there may be a time when you can break away, when you feel like the Lord has said, this season for that job is done, or this season for that extracurricular is past, and you need to say no to it because you're overextended and it's not bringing you life. And so consult with him to find out what are you responsible for and what are you called to. And this really helps because then even as you go forward and people ask you to do things, you can say no because you know in your heart, this is what I am called to, and I'm sticking to this. The second thing is that you should own your lane. So first thing is that you need to know your lane. You need to know yourself, and you need to own your lane. And this is very, very practical, okay? So practicing your yeses and your nos. And we always tell kids, right, that you need to practice your P's and Q's, your, please and thank yous. But we need to also reframe our minds to say we need to practice our yeses and our nos. And this can be really, really difficult because we have to stick to our value. We have to stick to the core value that we are going to stay in our own lane, that we're going to do only the things that we're called to, and that we're made for to be obedient in walking with the Lord. And that can be very difficult. It's very challenging. And this is, again, a place we can fall into a comparison trap because we just, veer off and we start saying yes to the little things that, we knew we weren't supposed to, but it's just that one thing, and by the end of the day, we've committed to then 10 more things that are completely maxing us out. And we're, again, finding ourselves in this place of potential burnout. So we need to have boundaries. You need to own your lane. So you say yes and you say no to the things that you feel you should say yes and no to. You determine who comes and who goes inside of your lane, okay? And that's all value. It's all based on the fact that you value your lane. You value your time, your talent, and your treasure. You're saying, I actually have so much value for my passion, for my dreams, for my vision, and the things that are on my life that you can't have it. You can't steal my joy. You can't take things from me that I don't give you. That is so important. For me, I was giving it away, left and right. You can have my time. You can have my talent. I'm just going to give it away for free. I'm just going to max myself out until I'm exhausted because you're more valuable than me, is essentially what I was saying. Was I have no value for myself, but I value you more. And I think that we need to learn to value ourselves and have boundaries and learn to say yes and no. Okay, so the third thing, we have knowing your lane, owning your lane. And the third thing is that you need to protect your lane. And I want to say this is kind of harsh, but people don't have the same priorities as you, and they don't necessarily care about your life first. As a general rule of thumb, people are thinking about what they need and their responsibilities and what they're called to. And so they'll ask you until the cows come home to do this or to do that, or, would you just do this small project for me? Would you take the kids, my kids here? And we're thinking, oh yeah, I can do that, but we're not considering what we can and cannot do. And so we go ahead and again value their stuff above ours, but we need to remember that their first priority is not us. We need to keep that in mind. We have to stick to it. And one thing that has become super vital for me, because I work in an industry, one of my jobs is consulting. And sometimes when you work with clients and stuff, they're very much, driven after their goal. And that's fantastic. That's what they're made to do. But in certain timelines, I was getting so hyped up and filled with anxiety because there would be like an emergency, right? Like a very time-sensitive thing, and it wasn't time-sensitive for me, and there wasn't a lot of notice, right? And so I would get all hyped up and, like, oh, I got to finish this project. I have to do it, and I wouldn't get any sleep, and I would, panic and send myself into this burnout mode when really it's not my emergency. Your emergency is not my emergency. That's really harsh, but it's true. Your emergency is not going to be something that I base my life around. If there's value to it, obviously, if it's something that I see like, okay, I really need to address that, that's one thing. But as a general rule of thumb, there have to be boundaries. You put up the boundaries, so you set up the boundaries. And that's so important. So, again, these three things. We need to know our lane, you have to own your lane, and then you have to protect your lane, right? So I hope that these things really helped to clarify your lane for you and what you're called to, and ultimately help you to increase your contentment in life and maybe potentially stop some burnout that may be happening right now. So what I would love to hear from you guys is, as I post these personality tests and as I post some of these other spiritual gift tests and some other things, I would love to hear some of your results. So if you have something that you've learned, if it's something about your personality or your spiritual gifts, even your natural gifts, I would love to hear, and maybe how it's affected you, if it's encouraged you, if it made you see even more, oh, this is why I'm actually not thriving in this job. This is why I'm close to burnout, because I'm operating as an accountant and really I'm a creative. That could easily burn you out. So I'd love to hear that. And again, if you have someone that who's struggling through some of these things, if they're feeling this pressure like we've talked about, and you think this video could bless them, I would love if you'd share it with them, and hopefully it can be an encouragement to them and what they're walking through. So I always love that I get to talk to you guys, and I hope that this encouraged you, blessed you, and ultimately inspired you. So I will talk to you guys again soon, and I love you. Bye.